Alright guys, today we're going to be learning about writing linear equations using 2 points.
Okay, as my assistant just told you, we're going to be learning how to write an equation, a linear equation, which is y equals mx plus b using 2 points. Okay, that means that we have to find the slope and we have to find the y-intercept. We have to find these two variables using 2 points. Okay, so once we get the slope and we get the y-intercept, we can write the equation and we can just plug it in. So this is a 3-step process. Okay, the first step is going to be finding the m. So we're going to find the slope. Okay, first step is to write out y equals mx plus b, and you are going to find the slope. And you find the slope using y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, that's the equation. This is your slope equation. So in order to do that, you need 2 points. Okay, so the 2 points that I'm going to give you are going to be 2, 2. And I'm just making up those points. If you're given other points, you can use those. So 2, 2. And your other set of points are going to be 3, 5. Okay, so you need to identify what is x1 and what is y1 and what is x2 and what is y2. So this is your x, this is your y, this is your x, this is your y. This is your first coordinate. So it's going to be x1, y1, and x2, y2. Okay, and we label those because that's your first coordinate, so you have x1, y1, and then that's your second coordinate, so you have x2 and then y2. And what we're going to do now is we're going to plug them into this equation. So for y, it says y2. So your y2 was 5. So I'm going to put 5 minus your y1 was 2. So 2. And then your x2 was 3. So I'm going to plug in 3 minus your x1, which your x1 was 2. And then we're just going to subtract and divide. So 5 minus 2 gives you 3. And then 3 minus 2 gives you 1. So that would make your slope 3. Okay? And that's how you find the slope. So you take your 2 points and you plug it into y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Then you subtract and then you divide. So your slope should be 3. Okay? So now we have the slope. Now we have to find the b. Okay, step 2, you're going to take and you're going to plug in the slope into y equals mx plus b. So you'll have y equals, instead of m, you'll have 3x plus b. Okay, and then next we're going to pick a point, and it could be any point. It could be this 2, 2, or it could be the 3, 5. And we're going to pick that, and then we're going to plug one of those in for x and y to solve for b. Okay, because b is our y-intercept. So I'm going to pick the easiest point, I think, which would be 2, 2. So I'm going to plug in the 2 and then the 2. And I'm going to plug those in to solve for b. So I'm going to write over here, I'm going to put 2 equals 3 times 2 plus b. 3 times 2 is 6 plus b. And then to get b by itself, I'm going to subtract 6 and subtract 6. And then 2 minus 6 is negative 4. So b equals negative 4. And that's like so exciting because all we needed was the m and the b, and now we can make an equation. And the last step after we get the m, okay, so I had some awesome questions that I need to answer about number 2. So if you're looking at number 2 and you wondered why I plugged in the 2 and the 2, it's because I took and picked one of these points up here. I picked one of the points up here and then I brought them down because these points are an x and a y value. And I needed an x and a y value to plug into the equation so I could solve for b. Anytime you're solving for a variable, you have to fill up each of those letters with a number in order to solve for the b. So I used 2 and 2, okay? But I could have also, I'm going to erase all of this, I could have also used this 3 and 5. So if I went back and instead of plugging in 2 and 2, I plugged in the 3 and the 5, and I plugged in the 3 for the x because this is the x value, and I plugged in the 5 for the y because that is the y value. If I were to plug those in, 5 equals 3 times 3 plus b, okay? Okay, so I'm going to plug in the 3 and the 5 instead. So 3 times 3 is going to give me a 9 plus b, and then I'm going to move the 9 over by subtracting. And then 5 minus 9 is going to give me a negative 4. And if you guys can remember, when I plugged in 2 and 2, I got the same b. So your b value is negative 4, and your m value was 3. Okay, so now we can take all of this, and step 3 is to plug m and b into the equation and your slope-intercept equation. So slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. And so m equaled 3 and b equaled negative 4. So where the m is, I'm going to put a 3. And then where the b is, I'm going to put the 4, which is negative, so I'm just going to put negative 4. So you're always going to have the y equal, so this is going to stay constant, y equals, and then you have the x, and then you're only going to plug in for the 3 and where the negative 4 is. So that's your m and that's your b. The reason that we have it in slope-intercept form, which we need to write that out, so this is slope-intercept form. And the reason that we do this is so that we can graph, because you can only graph equations that have y equals. So you're going to graph, and it's the y equals equation. Okay, so let's look on some graph paper and let's try to graph this. Okay, remember that this represents our y-intercept, and this represents our slope, or rise over run. All right, I'm going to graph the equation that I created, and I'm always going to start on the y-axis. Okay, so it says negative 4, so I'm going to put a point at negative 4. And then I am going to start at negative 4, because that's my y-intercept, and then this is my slope. And my slope is really rise over run. So this tells me up 3 and right 1, because they're positive. So from this point, I'm going to count up 1, 2, 3, and over 1, and then I'm going to put a point. And again, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, and over 1, and put a point. And I can keep going if I want to. So 1, 2, 3 over 1. Okay, to get the points on the other side, like over here, I would do the opposite. So I would go down 3, and then left 1. So from the point on the y-intercept, I'd go 1, 2, 3, and over 1. So then I would draw a line through all that. I don't have a ruler, so hopefully my line looks good. And then I can check this given the information that I had before, because the information I had before is asking like the 2 and the 2 and the 3 and the 5. So 3 and 3, or 3 and 5, sorry, 3 and 5, and then 2 and 2. We can check to make sure this is accurate by looking on our graph and saying, okay, does my line go through 2 and 2? And then you look and say, okay, my line goes through 2 and 2. So this is right. And then you look at 3 and 5. Is my line going to go through 3 and 5? Well, if my line was drawn correctly because I have no ruler, then it would go through 3 and 5. So that's accurate. Okay? We're going to do another example. So we're going to write an equation using the points 1, 1, and 3, negative 2. Okay, and you're going to use a 3-step process. So the first step that you're going to use is going to be the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 slope formula to find slope. Okay, so I want you to try this on your own, and I'm going to pause the video, and then I want you to come back to check your answers, okay? Okay, so we're going to plug in. So we have our y2 minus our y1, so negative 2 minus 1, and that gives you negative 3. And then we have 3 minus 1, and that's going to give us a 2. So negative 3 over 2 is going to give us basically a negative 1.5. Okay, and we're going to, the reason that I'm using negative 1.5 is because I'm going to have to plug this in. So before I plug this in, I want to make sure that my slope is written in a fraction form. So up here I'm going to write my slope. And then I'm going to use the decimal form to plug into my equation so I can find b. So I'm going to plug in, I'm going to take my slope equation, and you need to know the difference. So make sure you understand that this is your slope formula to calculate slope, but what I'm writing down here is my slope-intercept equation so that I can graph and so I can figure out b. So I'm going to plug in, for m, I'm going to plug in negative 1.5, and then I'm going to plug in one of these points. Okay, you could use the 3 and the negative 2, or you could use the 1 and the 1. I'm going to use the 1 and the 1 to plug in for x. Okay, and then now you have to add 1.5, because negative 1.5 times 1 is just going to give you a negative 1.5. So you add 1.5, add 1.5. 1 plus 1.5 is 2.5. So your b is 2.5. And then your step 3 is just to put them all together. So that means that you would take your m and you would write it out as y equals negative 3 halves x plus 2.5. And it's okay to leave your y-intercept as a decimal because it's easier to graph like that.
Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, subscribe. Have a good day. Have a good night. Whatever you're doing, just make it good, you know. And if you have any questions, just feel free to ask Ms. Bolin. Peace.